impacting lives, building leaders all around the world. Let us keep our dreams alive, cause tomorrow's gonna be a better day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the new episode of KECTIL Podcast Youth Network. I am your host, Nabila Abbas. Today, we have a very amazing episode starting from Kenyan Youth Uprising from Protest to Purpose, where we amplify youth voices from across the world, especially those fighting for justice, freedom, and a better future. Today, we turn to Kenya, a country where young people are taking streets, the internet, and the world stage, demanding accountability, dignity, and change. From protests over harsh economic policies, nationwide grief over the killing of young citizens, Kenyan youth have shown resilience in the face of violence. And I am proud to say that they, very young and marvelous two young activists from Kenya, has joined us. Edward Kipkalya and Wycliffe Guguni. Before I jump into the question sections and start the conversation with these two young activists, I would request both of you to introduce yourself to the audience. Can we start, Edward, with you?
Thank you for having me, Nabila. As you said, my name is Edward Kipkalya. I serve as a Strategic Initiatives and Partnership Officer at Emerging Leaders Foundation Africa, where we focus on nurturing the next generation of ethical, values-driven leaders across the continent. I also have the privilege of serving as an advisory board member of the KECTIL Kenya, which has been doing incredible work in youth leadership development and policy engagement with young entrepreneurs and young Kenyans, which is even more critical given what's been happening recently in the country. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward, and welcome to this podcast episode. Gugni, please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you so much, Nabila, for having me. As you've said, my name is Wycliffe Guguni from Kenya, and I'm the country director for the KECTIL program in Kenya, the KECTIL Center. I'm responsible for the strategic direction of the KECTIL initiative here in Kenya. My background is in innovation management, impact planning and assessment. I also work in building communities of social entrepreneurs as well. And I'm a businessman here in Kenya also. So I've been involved working with young people since the inception of KECTIL. I've been part of the program here in Kenya, working with youth from different parts of the country, getting to traverse and organize events and engaging young people, just like Kipkalya has mentioned, in issues of public policy and youth involvement in entrepreneurship. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Yeah, that is amazing. Thank you so much once again to both of you as our wonderful speaker for today. And as it is a cross conversation between the two speakers, so I would request that on each question being asked by any one of you, you can even comment or maybe leave your remarks as well in the end. So over to you, Edward. Let's start the conversation with this first question, which is, of course, very important and uprising. What is the start? Let's start at the root. Like, what triggered this wave of youth protest in Kenya? And how did the finance bill become the breaking point?
Well, Nabila, the Finance Bill 2024 was not the cause, as you've said, but it was mainly a catalyst. It was a catalyst that really brought the main issue at hand during that period. For years, the Kenyan young people have been suffocating because of the immense weight of economic pressure. We, as a country, we have seen a lot of youth unemployment rates that are stubbornly going high each and every time. And if you look at the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, it shows that the age of bracket between 20 and 29 bears the heaviest burden of joblessness in the country. And so this is a generation that has been promised a digital economy and a brighter future, but instead they have been inheriting national debt and diminishing opportunities. And that's why the finance bill felt like a profound betrayal. It was really a moral injury to the young people because when young people who struggle to buy data bundles, for example, see a proposed 16% value added tax on bread or a motor vehicle tax that impacts on their transport that they use day to day, and increased financial taxes on transactions that they majorly do online. They see a government that is completely almost cruel, that is detached from understanding the real issues are. And also they see this also as a betrayal because the bill proposed to take from what the little they have been having because of the current situation in the economic outlook of the country. And so that moment was a moment of them expressing that frustration, and that frustration really came out during the finance bill 2024. But on the other side, what is very significant is that they did not just react emotionally. We saw for the first time a generation of young people who were reading the bill, uh, reading it line by line. They created infographics. They used AI to summarize the whole bill and crafted different TikTok explainers, breaking down that complex clauses of the finance bill. And so that was more of an informed resistance because of that, it achieved a lot of mass civic education. And that led to a lot of revolt against the finance bill. And it became a breaking point for them to have their frustration being taken out. And that's how the root cause of economic injustice came about through the finance bill of 2024. Nabila, we can't hear you.
Hello. Yeah, Edward. Thank you very much for uh, sharing this important information, your remarks, as well as the current situation of young people in Kenya as well, that how they are responding, how their frustration triggered. And of course, it does matter for them as well. And it is a motive as well for them. And it clearly shows that uh, like the political situation of the country, that how the freedom of youth is being taken from them. So uh, I'm just moving to Guguni and will ask him, can you walk us through the Ruto Must Go movement, how it started and what it represents for Gen Z and other young people? And also, if you would like to uh, leave your remarks in the first person as well, if you want.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nabila. It's a pleasure to contribute to this conversation. And just to pick it up from where Edward has left, and to kind agree that the finance bill was a trigger to boiling problems and challenges that we had. And I fundamentally see the problem in Kenya as a governance problem. And governance, like you know, is centered on adherence to the rule of law, accountability, and responsibility to the citizenry. And that was something that was missing in the political regime that took over after 1 year period. Now, the Ruto Must Go movement is a symbol that is anchored on trying to drive out the bad governance, the system of bad governance. It's not just Ruto as an individual, but as a person, but as someone who embodies the bad governance or the bad values. The reason why I say this is because the Ruto Must Go movement started through young people sharing memes and jokes about the lies that the president has been telling the public, how he's been launching projects, how he's been saying, I've allocated this amount of money to these particular projects. And then a couple of weeks down the line, there are no contractors working on this project. So number one was lies. So there was blatant lies that have never been experienced by a president in this country, spoken without shame to the citizens. So it got to a point where the president could speak lies and not hold himself or even not want to be held accountable for it. Number two, it is a slogan that emerged after we experience political political appointments in positions where requires merits. So we saw that the regime was using power to reward political loyalists, positions that require expertise and competence for this to be accomplished. This was being done by a regime that campaigned on the basis of supporting young people, on the basis of supporting the people at the lower of the pyramid, the what we call here in Kenya mama mboga, the very micro entrepreneurs, trying to campaign on how to support these micro entrepreneurs. But what we saw after the election is that government started rewarding political loyalists, number one. We even had the deputy president at that time saying that this is a shareholders' government. And if you're not involved in campaigning for this government, you're not going to get anything. This government is only for the people who are involved in supporting. That was not what the language they used during the political campaign period. So the Ruto Must Go movement was trying to scrap off Ruto and what he embodies, the idea of lies, political appointments, and bad governance. So that is how the Ruto Must Go movement started to grow. It was a transformation, call for transformation, call for change, and scrapping of bad governance, lies, and political bigotry. Thank you, and back to you.
So thank you. Thank you, Guguni, very much for this all information and what is happening right now in Kenya, as well as the bad political situation, the melodrama by the politicians as well, and the government. It can be truly devastating for the young people, for their mindsets, for their mental health as well. It is totally understandable. But here is a question. Maybe I am asking this question, Edward. Both of you can comment on this. Was this protest only about the economy, or did it open the floodgates to deeper frustrations? How would you like to respond to this in a broader aspect?
Thank you, Nabila, for that. And just to say, as mentioned previously, the evolution here is to see how deeper the issue and frustrations were. And the evolution that we can see is the finance bill was the tip of the iceberg. Behind the iceberg, we had a lot of deeper frustration. And yes, it was more than economy. The economy was the entry point, the door that everyone could walk through. But once inside the room, there was a lot of different rooms that were filled with different grievances. The protest also really showed us the deeper frustration that the younger generation has been processing a lot through digital platforms before eventually going to the streets. We saw conversations that expanded beyond the deep-rooted rot of systemic corruption. It became about the impunity of the police service, an institution that many Kenyans, especially those in urban, in poor urban areas and rural areas, have learned to fear rather than trust. And reports from the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, for example, have for years documented extrajudicial killings with little accountability. And this protest really put that reality on full display for middle class and especially the international community. It also became about political dishonesty, as Guguni has mentioned, and the hypocrisy that happens within the political class. Because this is a generation that watched the 2022 election fight on a hustler narrative promising to lift the common citizen. But the finance bill felt like it was a complete abandonment of the core promise. And young people had been documenting the police brutality across social media for years. Watch femicide cases go uninvestigated, while politicians continue to make empty pronouncements. And so the digital age had given these young people unprecedented access to information about how the government really functioned or failed to function. And so that made the difference because they had a reference point towards some of the documented injustices that had been done. And now it was the time to voice them out because no one was listening to them. People were just brushing them off, especially the leaders. And so that is what really went on, and that is how the deeper frustrations were opened. And so the evolution into now from Reject Finance Bill 2024 to Ruto Must Go was a shift from the initial intent, which was to reject finance bill, but now towards the direct consequences of the state response towards the young people issues that they'd been raising because no one was open and willing to listen to them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edward, once again for your thoughtful remark this question. And you said it very well that digital age has actually played a vital role in accessing the right information to the young people. Totally agree with this. As we have now been talking about the digital age, our next segment was also about digitalization and colonizing, how Kenyan young have the privilege of this as well. So over to you, Guguni. This can be a follow-up question. It is said that this was called a leaderless protest. How did young Kenyans organize without formal leadership? I think this is surprising.
So thank you so much, Nabila, for that question. And first of all, I want to point out that social media is at the center of these protests. So social media heavily contributed to how young people are able to mobilize and organize themselves into a movement that transformed how protests are being done in the country. And previously, we've seen that protests were being called by political leader Majorly Raila Odinga, and people usually came out to the streets, normally not very young people, middle-aged people, and some of them being paid for them to come out. But for the Gen Z protest in Kenya, people are not being paid. In fact, people are contributing money to support, buy water, give medical attention. People fundraised up to tunes of $10,000 to support in medical care, in purchasing water, masks for people who are going out in the streets. And this was through social media, this was through mobile money, and this was through sharing in groups, WhatsApp groups, in Twitter Spaces. Something else that we saw is there were a lot of conversations that were coming up just ahead of the dates of the protest. So posters could go out from every corner on the agreed date. And then before the days of the protest, there were Twitter conversations, spaces that were being hosted by leading influential individuals. And what made it so successful is that everyone was in one voice. Everyone was talking about getting Ruto out of the seat and asking not only for not asking for scrapping out the finance bill. At first, people were saying we need to amend. Others were saying we need to let go the entire bill. But when people started acting in unity, in one voice, that we do not want amendment, we want the entire finance bill to go, and everyone was bought to the idea, the whole country started speaking in one voice. People mobilized and agreed to meet in the respective locations. So the protest was not only in Nairobi, it was in different towns and cities within the country. So the conversations on the spaces, one voice and solidarity about the clarity of what everyone wants, and also the contributions towards that particular cause made these protests very successful in a way that had never been experienced before. So leaderless meant that nobody was expecting this to be the responsibility of a group of people or 3 or 4 people. Everybody knew that it is my responsibility to bring this change that I want in the country. If I have 5 cents, I'm going to make my contribution of these 5 cents. So even the people who are collecting the funds, they were not considered the leaders. They were just considered contributors. So everyone had ownership of this movement, and everyone felt responsible for this movement, and that is why it was so successful. So nobody was sitting waiting for directions. Everyone was making their little contribution to see that the change they desire happens. Thank you, and back to you.
Yeah, that is truly, fascinating to even imagine how young Kenyans are going out of their homes with unity, responsibility. And this was a good idea, what you have mentioned, that now everyone is, realizing that this is their responsibility. So altogether, it is a unity. Very well said. So, while we're talking about some, experiences and some examples from digital age, Edward, over to you. If you would like to quote some, scenes, maybe some talk clips, you want to talk about that, how they are using these social media specifically and how much impact they are making so far. Any, examples you want to quote from TikTok, Twitter, Facebook?
Sure, Nabila. I will just want to pick it up from where Guguni has left, because Guguni has just talked about the overall overview of these tools. So I'll go in detail. And from my own analysis, I have a background in technology. And so one of the key things that we're also doing during that period is to also do a lot of observation of how these tools were being used. And I found out that each of the platforms that was used served a really distinctive strategic function that became very useful in fighting against the campaign warfare and disinformation by the state narratives. And so, for example, X, which is formerly Twitter, was a nerve center for real-time information and coordination. So there were use of hashtags like Reject Finance Bill 2024, hashtag Occupy Parliament, and hashtag Ruto Must Go. And they were the tools for centering real-time information and coordination, where people could just go and find out what was happening in whatever place of the country. We saw young people using Twitter threads to break down these complex policy issues, and also provide different legal updates, whether someone was arrested or if there's someone who needs a medical emergency. And also, when there was a police violence that occurred, X became the primary platform for documentation, and rather it also became a place for witness protection. If you look at TikTok, on the other side, it really became a tool for political education for the younger generation. We saw complex issues and constitutional issues together with economic policies being transformed into very small, accessible, understandable, and shareable content. We saw young creators, content creators who were making policy entertaining and understandable. And this became a crucial for counter narrative when the mainstream media ignored or misrepresented their movement. We also saw Instagram as a visual memory bank of the movement. So stories, posts, and reels documented everything from the peaceful demonstration to police brutality. And because of the visual nature of the platform, it made it very impossible to ignore because international audiences accessed Kenya's crisis through Instagram content because of a lot of visual content being churned out on Instagram. We also saw the use of Telegram and WhatsApp that provided secure organizing spaces away from surveillance. Although at some point Telegram was pulled down, and this platform handles sensitive logistics. For example, medical coordination, legal aid networks, real-time safety updates, and also to offer direction for the different young people in different parts of the country. Another tool that came in handy was Zello. Zello is a push-to-talk walkie-talkie app that sends live signal from where you are. And so we saw young people in the streets really maximizing the use of Zello, uh, telling each other where police are, where the tear gas has been thrown, so that young people can avoid going to those places. With all these networks of social media tools being organized, my concern has been that the same digital tools that are empowering that movement have also created echo chambers and purity tests that really undermine the coalition building. And so while social media activism is powerful, we're also seeing a lot of them having a lot of frustration because of that lack of channeling the issues strategically. And that's why it is very easy for the government to really pick a few of the so-called influencers within the movement and give them jobs within government. And with that frustration, the young people then become frustrated and not speak in one voice. And so that's the disadvantage with all these tools that we've seen young people use.
Thank you very much, Edward, for mentioning all these things that are, uniquely happening on the social media, and that how uh, differently and uniquely Kenyan young people are using the power of social media. Like this can be very exemplary situation as well from across the world. But again, I have this question to you because in the news we are reading a lot of this information about police violence and human cost. That so many young people have shut down. What are the facts about reality on ground? Like was like at one of these protests.
Thank you, Nabila. The Gen Z has fundamentally altered the rules of political engagement in Kenya. And allow me to use these loosely. Gen Z here to mean the young people, both the generation Alpha, the millennials, and also the generation Z. And there is no going back because of that altering of the political engagement in Kenya. And this is how they have turned the power dynamics. First, we've seen that they have made transparency non-negotiable. Politicians can no longer make promises in rallies and contradict themselves in parliament without immediate digital accountability. Young people are screenshotting everything. They are creating comparison videos about what you said 5 years ago and what you're saying now. They're maintaining what we call receipts that traditional media often missed or ignored. This has forced the new level of consistency from the public officials, some of them who fear even working with young people. Secondly, we've seen that they have bypassed traditional media gatekeeping entirely. When mainstream media outlets, for example, fail to cover police brutality or they misrepresent protest activities, Gen Zs created their own media ecosystem that I've just talked about. And that citizen journalists emerged with larger, more trusted audiences than established reporters. And so these force traditional media to either adapt or become irrelevant. And what we've seen right now, we've seen a lot of media traditional media going live on TikTok to share news content on TikTok. And that is really showing how they're trying to adapt because if they don't, then they become irrelevant. But thirdly, we are seeing the introduction of global standards to local politics. Through social media, we've seen young people comparing Kenya's governance to international best practices in real time. For example, they don't accept that these are African standards or these are developing country, which are sometimes used as excuse for poor governance. And this global perspective has raised expectations dramatically. However, I must offer a critical observation because digital activism without institutional engagement risk becoming a permanent opposition without constructive alternatives. And so the same platforms that mobilized for this movement are also creating pressure for ideological purity that really fragments collision and the necessary political change that is needed. And so Gen Z's challenge or the young people challenge now is translating this digital influence into real institutional powers while still maintaining their principles and authenticity.
Thank you, Edward, for this, precise information and summing up this like very, thoughtfully. And the purpose of this today's episode as well is that we have to convey the young voices across the world to our audience, ever listening from, across the countries from where they are residing. So I believe this information is very potential and very important for them as well, so that they should know the facts about all these situation happening in Kenya right now. And also, like over to you, Guguni. We have read about horrific deaths, like that of YouTube blogger Albert Ojwang and the Basabade killings. What is the emotional and social impact of this violence on youth?
Yeah, thank you, Nabila, for that question. And it is indeed a very sad experience that we watch as a country that a young person who expresses his democratic views about the situation of corruption, especially by the police in the country, is picked up, is taken to the local police station, and unconstitutionally transferred from the area of jurisdiction where he should be charged all the way to Nairobi by the instructions of the deputy police commissioner, brought to a cell in Nairobi, is tortured inside the cell under the instructions of the police commissioner, and is tortured to the extent of being killed and being taken to the morgue by the police. And then the police avoid taking accountability until the public uproar came out and they started doing an investigation and brought out junior officers to take the burden of the deputy police of commissioner who issued the deputy police commander who issued these instructions. It is indeed saddening, and I want to point out that Albert's situation is not unique. It is only that Albert's situation got public attention, but I can speak with certainty that that is the reality of many young people whose voices have not come out in the public, in our cells. I'm speaking with certainty because I've witnessed this kind of police brutality in our cells, and not only because of political motivation, but it has been a culture. So one of the emotions that it drives is fear. People are afraid of the police. And like Edward had mentioned, people do not trust the police institution. This is a very sad reality, especially because when the president came in, he set up a police task force to conduct investigations and give recommendations on what kind of police reforms are required, which was headed by the former Emeritus Chief Justice Maranga. And one of the recommendations within this task force was retraining the police officers and also ensuring independence of the police commanders in different locations. If this recommendation had been implemented, the police commander in the region where Albert had been arrested would not have released Albert from that jurisdiction to Nairobi because of the independent role. Also, something else within the task force report was to reduce or eliminate political interference in the police and avoid using the use of police by politicians to threaten or to intimidate civilians. We see that is still happening with institutions such as the DCI and the police service in Kenya. So this tells us that there isn't political goodwill in implementing the reforms that were given as recommendations by this particular task force in 2023. So if we are going to change how citizenry interact with the police, we must be serious and show political goodwill in implementing police reforms. Other police reforms that we need to see is accountability and transparency in the process of handling cases from the cell all the way to the courts. To increase accountability and transparency, we need cameras in police stations that record real-time events on what is happening within the cells and these police stations. During Albert's case, cameras footages got lost. Most of our police cells do not have cameras. That is a reform that needs to be implemented. How bails and bonds get paid at the police stations to the courts. We have mobile money. Why can't we have mobile payments in police cells so that if you're caught with minor offenses, you can pay a bond and be released on a bail and turn up in court for that matter? So the emotions are there, but also there's part of reforms in terms of what we need to think about in these moments of sadness, in these moments of pain, of mistrust. How can we regain trust? We have to implement these reforms. We have to get back to the police task force report of 2023 by Maranga and initiate political goodwill to increase accountability, avoid political interference, retrain the police officers, and have transparency in dealing with cases, especially at the local police stations level. So something else that Albert case tells us is that it's curtailing the freedom of speech, and anybody who expresses their opinion. If they say something that is wrong, there's a due process that should be involved in getting them to account for their behavior. And if this due process is not followed, then it gives room for injustice. That is why we have the Constitution, and an adherence to the rule of law is what ensures that the country operates smoothly. If we have situations whereby people use their authority to intimidate, torture, and murder civilians, then it sets precedents, bad precedents, that if you do not have political power or political authority, then you do not stand a chance to live peacefully and freely in this country. That is not the country we want. We want an opportunity where we can live freely and express ourselves without fear. Thank you, and back to you.
Yeah, you said it very well. Like when they don't have power of their politics to use in correct way, then they are using this kind of violence and even killing the young people. That is, of course, very horrific. And I'm sure that many young people from across the world are watching the news on different channels. If not available, then still this podcast can also be a hope to listen to are these young speakers directly from Kenya. So I believe this is going to be very important. So while we are talking about the violence and killing of young people, openly, directly, uh, how what do you think? Like over to you, Edward. What do you think this is the message behind? Like what is the message behind this violence response from the state toward young people? Like I know like this is being very horrific out of words, but what they wanted to convey, is it a threat, or they want to terrify young people to step back from these kind of protests, or even beyond this?
Thank you, Nabila. And what Guguni has mentioned is very, very critical about the issue of trust and distrust. Because if you looked at the streets and you witnessed, if you are there, what you'll have witnessed is essentially an issue of lack of trust. Because we saw a lot of peaceful protesters um, being resorted with live ammunition and also being tear gassed, which was very sad. And the message is very clear. The message is that the government says that dissent would be met with disproportionate force. If you go on the streets, we'll come, we will unveil a lot of disproportionate force, tear gas, live ammunition. And that's the message we're getting. The other message that we are getting is that political consciousness is dangerous for young people. They are communicating to us that we should not be politically conscious, that it's dangerous for us as young people. The other message that we are getting is that young people should just remain politically passive as consumers rather than become active citizens. And this was was also being propelled over and over again. I remember listening to different politicians speak during that period. And it became a case not of a leader with their citizens, but a case of parents and children. Young people as being seen as children, and political leaders being seen as parents, and political leaders telling our parents to teach morality to their young people who are their kids. And so it no longer became an issue of citizenship, but a case of families. And that was a big problem, because if a leader starts seeing you as a child and not as an active citizen, then an issue of distrust become very clear. We saw also the targeting of specific individuals, whether journalists, bloggers, young people, um, and that reveals that there was a strategy to really decapacitate the emerging leadership and intimidate young people from moving forward. But also, we saw that ultimately, this is a desperation of violence because the government recognizes that this movement represented an existential threat to their way they used to do things. And the young people, since they did not have any, they were perceived leaderless. Um, and because of their decentralized structure of running the movement, they could not be bought, they could not be divided, they could not be refused to be bought. And that created a lot of a threat within the political system. And so it was also a warning that we are not ready for the change that we want. That if you want to change us, we'll have to fight for it. And so I I believe that ultimately this violent response was really a very wrong strategic move on the side of the government because instead of breaking the movement, it really created a new resolve among young people that they will want to show them that they cannot be intimidated by breaking the movement and use of live ammunition towards them. And so young people really became aware and understood what they are fighting for. And this violence has made really the stakes, even right now, very high. And we really need to have a clear pathway forward as Guguni has mentioned about how we can rebuild this trust because we are at a very bad place politically as a country. We lost him.
Yeah, thank you, Edward. And it was a powerful statement when you said that it seems like political consciousness seems danger to them. Of course, that is why they are using a wrong strategy to, shut down young people and to terrify them with such, practices of violence. And that is totally wrong, of course. However, let's talk about some, youth development, because we already know that KECTIL Kenya chapter is also a very, running operating chapter in Kenya, and it has been, providing super youth development programs, capacity building workshops, and other skills as well to young Kenyans. And of course, Gugni is leading this chapter. So my question is to you: what does KECTIL Kenya Chapter to support youth leadership and development, especially during this politically sensitive time?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nabila, for that question. And I think there's no critical moment to get young people to be organized than moments like these, where it calls for their participation, especially in a country like Kenya, where majority of the population are young people. We have a median age of 19.5, and that means over 50% of our population are below 35 years. This is very critical because we are the ones who will bear heavily the consequences of the political decisions that are being made right now. The KECTIL Center has been providing opportunities for young people to come and speak their mind, and not only just on general issues, but specifically on policy issues. One of the conversations that we've been having with young people in Kenya is how can young people be actively involved in making changes, reforms in policies such that it can create more opportunities for them to innovate and to be better entrepreneurs in the country. We believe that the future of a nation is built by innovators. and the businesses. If we create an environment where solutions and ideas are being promoted and are being supported, in an environment where these innovators are nurtured, then we're able to provide solutions to the myriad of challenges that the country is facing. So the KECTIL Center in Kenya has been focused on having these kind of conversations. So we're looking at influencing policies, making recommendations, and lobbying for these changes. We've been involved in public participation in the development of or amendments of the National Youth Policy in Kenya, giving a memorandum statement for the kind of changes that we would like to see. Some of these memorandums that we submit to government are not being responded to, but we continue to speak. We cannot stop speaking just because we are not getting the kind of feedback that we want. We continue to advocate for better policies that will create an environment for people to do business and to innovate. That has been our focus. That has been our call. Something else that we are standing firmly on is adherence to the rule of law. We want to live in a country where the Constitution is the principal ruler. We do not want to live a country where an individual turns out to be the ruler. We want someone who has got respect for the rule of law, because any country, even look at it biblically, or you look at it in any religious terms, people are guided by a book. The Christians are abided by the Bible. The Muslims are guided by the Quran. The Hindus, the Gita. There's reference to a constitution. And this is the book that people go to whenever there's crisis, and it directs them to the right path. This is the word of truth, the Constitution. And that is what brings order. That is what brings a sense of direction. That is the source of good governance. And we want to promote adherence to the rule of law. So part of the conversations we've been having in KECTIL is that we want leaders who have got reverence and respect for the rule of law, people who have a knack for justice, and people who have a knack for adherence to the rule of law, following what the Constitution says. So better policies, better laws leads to justice and leads to a peaceful society. So within the KECTIL Center, we are having these conversations in universities, and we're looking forward to channeling more reports, more memorandum on what young people want to be done in terms of policies and in terms of the rule of law. Thank you, and back to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Guguni, for mentioning all these, efforts done by KECTIL chapter in Kenya. And more power to you and to the KECTIL community in Kenya. And of course, our audience can follow Kenyan chapter on social media, as well as they can mainstream these activities on main KECTIL channel as well, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, because through these activities you can actually have a look over that what is KECTIL being doing in different countries. So thank you very much for such wonderful efforts, and keep it up. Of course, this is a very high time, very difficult time for you as a leader, as well as for the young other Kenyans as well. So yeah, thank you once again for all these efforts. So let's talk about the sport to youth, like how sport youth not just to resist injustice, but to reimagine Kenya's future as well. Edward, over to you.
Thank you, Nabila. And this is perhaps the most critical question, I believe, facing Kenya's youth movement today. And it's where our work at KECTIL, but also where I serve as emerging leaders, really becomes relevant. Because protest energy is important for disrupting systems, but it can also it needs to be strategically channeled to institutional power for sustainable development frameworks. And so reimagination requires moving beyond the critique to construction. Uh, and it also requires us moving beyond the protest to policies and implementation. But most importantly, building alternative systems. Well, and this is something I call revolutionary pragmatism, because young people need a platform for policy innovation, as Guguni has mentioned, something that really KECTIL is very keen on policy innovation. And young people need these platforms so that they can develop comprehensive alternatives to failed systems. This means creating research institutes, think tanks, policy development networks, specifically designed for youth leadership. Because too often, when a young person wants to join into a new system, they are asked to join an existing system rather than build a new institution that really reflect their values and approaches. The second thing that we are learning from this protest, and it's very critical, is that young people want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be listened to, they want a space for them to voice out their concerns. And this is very critical to their well being, because what we've seen as a country and as young people, we've witnessed a lot of collective trauma. If you look at the last 1 year, 1.5 years, for example, almost 2 years, we've seen a generation that has seen daily deaths and killing of their fellow young people each and every time. And that really is very difficult to process at different stages. And so we're seeing a lot of collective trauma. And so young people need a space for them to be listened to. They just need a leader who can listen to them without necessarily saying anything, but give them a space where they can voice their concerns. And that is becoming very critical. That leads me to something I call adaptive leadership, that is critical for us to really build our young people, but also the systems thinking approach towards ensuring that we have adaptive leaders best who can adapt best to different situations that happen, but still maintain their principles as individuals. We're also seeing that, lastly, political innovation requires new forms of democratic participation that is beyond the traditional electoral politics. This includes participatory budgeting that is being done in Kenya. We're also seeing the need to include digital democracy platforms. A lot of conversation are currently happening about how can we move from having a manual electoral system to a fully digital voting system in our upcoming election. And also, we also finally seeing that there is need for us to challenge our culture, that we need to have a cultural transformation, that as young people, we must model the different ways of the society that we want to be and the society that we are looking forward to, whether it's our approach to leadership, whether it's our definition of success, whether it's our collective well-being over our individual accumulation and individual pursuits as young people, that it's important for us to model what we want to see, that if we are not the ones modeling the change that we want to see, then no one else will come and model for us. And what we might just be hoping for, we might not really see it if we don't model and walk the talk of what we want to see.
Yeah, that is very true. That the change will begin from all ourselves, like within ourselves. It is within us. So thank you, Edward, like having very thoughtful remarks about this question and explaining this very wonderfully to our audience as well. I hope so. Like our audience is resonating with all these conversation, and now they are having an access to the facts and the right information, because we have the right ambassadors at the moment whom are directly speaking from Kenya and telling us all this situation, what is happening for the past few months. So let's just talk about more, solidarity, safety, and the way forward. So my question to you, Gugani, what safety strategies or mental health practices do you recommend for young activists currently facing trauma or police brutality? Because of course we have been talking about protest, about activities on social media, that how passionate young Kenyans are and how the unity have emerged. But of course, on the other hand, they have also been facing drastic outcomes of mental health as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nabila, for that question. And I'm not a mental health expert, but I'm going to speak in general terms as a layman and also based on my personal experiences through this situation. So I'm going to talk about my moment of traumatic experience. Maybe some can relate, some might not, and how I handled it, and maybe share advice on how other people can handle it. I've been arrested a couple of times for different reasons, but the last time I was arrested by a traffic police officer who took me to a cell when I was riding a motorbike at that point, and when I went inside the cell, I saw people being beaten, being hit against the wall. I saw a man's head crack and bleed in front of my eyes in the hands of the police officer. I witnessed all this as I'm trying to negotiate my way out of that particular cell. Luckily for me, I had people who I could call and talk to and have conversations so that they could address this situation. At that particular point, I have a friend who was vying for a political seat in that area, who I called, and he talked to the OCPD, who is like the head of that particular police station. And I was released. But I had a conversation with him later on and asked, how can this be addressed? And from our conversation, he told me that this is a complaint that many young people have been going through a lot. Young people being killed by the police in the hood, uh, people being beaten in the cell, some of them getting permanent injuries, and they don't have a way of getting it addressed. Like I've mentioned, we've had commissions of inquiry that have been put across to do investigations on issues of police reforms, but not much action has been taken. So how can we protect ourselves mentally and physically against such things? Number one, do not keep quiet when you are going through this kind of difficulty. Find someone reliable who you can speak to and share and have conversation with about your struggle. Don't lock yourself in a room. Don't keep quiet, mulling over what you've experienced or what you've seen or what is troubling you. Speak up, speak. That is where it starts. Have the courage to speak to somebody, share it out, share with somebody. Number two, identify support community group. One thing that I did after this whole experience, I knew that if I do not have people who can support and share with, and who can come through for me, then I'll definitely be in trouble. Someone like Albert Ujuang, the teacher who was taken all the way from their home village to the central police station, they probably did not have someone to tell, someone to help them. They were helpless because they are from the village, they know no one. So when you're in such kind of a situation, you cannot address this issue. So when you're not in that situation, try to build communities. Reach out to KECTIL networks. Reach out to other youth networks within your community. Be involved in youth activism. Sometimes young people say, politics does not affect me. I will not be involved. I don't care what is happening in the country. That is wrong. You need to be involved in civic engagement. The organization that Kipkalya is working with reaches out to the grassroots, Emerging Leaders Foundation. They reach out to the grassroots, organized by others. Be involved in this kind of movements. Connect with other young people. Be part of these networks of young people who are advocating for change, and share. Get known. Speak up amongst these forums. Because if you don't, you're not having someone to talk to or communicate to when you're in danger, because there are WhatsApp groups. If you're caught up in such situation, you can post a message. People will go viral talking about you. We've seen in Kenyan situation where abductions are happening. People post pictures and share, they go viral, and people get released because of that uh, noise or public outro that people are making on persons who have been abducted. So one way of addressing this issue is preventive and rather than reactive after it has happened. So build a community, speak up, speak to a specialist, speak to a friend, speak to someone, be part of a community so that you can get the right kind of support. And as well, seeking also professional help is very important. A counselor, going to hospital, you can check online amongst the different organizations that are supporting young people for free with professional help on mental issues. One of them is called Befrienders Kenya. So Befrienders Kenya, they have a line which you can call, and if you have an issue that you need assistance on, you can get professional assistance for free. You only need to register with that. Is it half a cent? And then you get $50, actually, $50, and you get assistance. So these are avenues in which young people can explore. But most importantly, don't struggle alone. Speak up. Find a community of people who can support you and build that relationship. Thank you, and back to you.
Um, yeah, I believe this is very important when you said that you have to speak about your problem. You have to never stop about it. And because when they will speak about their issue, what is bothering them, and what is the cause, of course, they will have the opportunity to solve it in a better way. Very much, Gugni, for this very, thoughtful and very precisely giving this advice to the young people, not just only to the young Kenyans, but I believe this advice can be for the other young people as well across the world, whomsoever is facing any kind of violence, or maybe they are in conflict zone areas. So this is very powerful message. Thank you once again. So let's talk about some, hope and prosperity. Edward, over to you. How do you see solidarity growing across regions, East Africa, and then, pretty widely as well? Is there any chances, or maybe even you can hear some examples as well, or maybe still there needs to be work done on it?
Thank you, Nabila. Yes, so the solidarity emerging around the Kenya's young people uprising represents something really unprecedented in the African political organizing, where we are seeing a lot of Pan-African consciousness within a generation that is digitally connected, that generation that are keen on strategic coordination from previous solidarity movements that have happened before. In East Africa, for example, we are seeing young people in Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, and even Congo drawing a lot of direct inspiration from Kenya and the Gen Z protest. We are seeing, for example, they are adapting their hashtag campaigns, digital documentation for what is happening in their countries. Also seeing also the leaderless or what I call decentralized leadership model within their local context. In Nigeria, for example, we have seen this Gen Z movement here in Kenya learn from other continental uprisings that have happened before. For example, the End SARS movement that happened in Nigeria. We also saw Zimbabwean Lives Matter. There was also the Sudan uprising. And those really created a lesson or learning for other young people who have seen the challenges that these different uprising made and how they can adapt differently and do things differently. And so, what we are seeing as part of evolution is the different youth movements learning from each other and bettering their approach and systemic see their systems of approaching different issues and concerns in their countries. Now, we're also seeing another aspect which is critical, and that is the diaspora. And then you're seeing a lot of diaspora supporting a lot of young people in their countries, particularly young people from other countries who are not within the continent. They will use their position to amplify the struggles of the movement. They are going to lobby institutions in those countries and even provide financial support for different activists who are facing repression from government. And then social media has been the foundation to make this coordination very seamless. Uh, but this solidarity, I believe, goes beyond that support and that symbolic support. And because as young people are sharing the practical knowledge, they are also learning how to organize securely. And I'm pretty much sure that what other young people are learning from the Kenya's Gen Z protests is how they can be able to organize securely under surveillance, how they can be able to counter state propaganda, how they can be able to provide uh, and engage international media effectively. All these representing an institutional memory that makes the movement stronger. I also want to finalize by saying that we are seeing institutions that are really facilitating these connections. For example, KECTIL, who are facilitating these connections with between the young people and these institutions. We've seen, for example, partnership between KECTIL Kenya and the Law Society of Kenya or an independent policing oversight authority, just to find that harmonious nature that young people can trust these institutions and bring that restorative justice together. And so, what we are seeing also on the other side, there's also a flip side to this side. We are seeing a lot of authoritarian governments across the continent learning from each other and what repressive strategies they can use for activists, and whether that works and how it works for them. We are seeing them exchanging notes as well, and so it is a learning that is happening in both ways, both for the oppressor and the oppressee. And so we are living at a very interesting times, and and for us as young people is really to plan what we want to do moving forward, so that we are also one step ahead. Because if we are not one step ahead, then we risk losing a whole generation from political leadership in the country.
Yeah, thank you, Edward, for mentioning a lot of good facts as well. And also, when you said that the trustworthy institutions and centers does matter a lot at this moment because it is a very sensitive situation, and every young Kenyan have to be unit, trustworthy, and to realize their responsibility as well in the meantime. So, yeah, thank you very much. And wow, this was a very, powerful conversation about the Kenya situation right now. And so far, we have been discussing about the protest, the activities of young people in Kenya, how they are responding, and the uh, use of social media as a strong tool as well, and also the very devastating side of some of the consequences, which are like very major. For example, the deaths of young people, activists as well. So this is really horrific, and I believe that this podcast can help our audience from across the world to listen the right information and to have the access to this information as well. So please listen to this podcast episode. You just have to tune in and just listen smoothly, and you will be, shockingly surprised that how hostility is being practiced and how violence is being practiced on young people, and how they are being taken out of their access to the practice of freedom of speech as well. Thank you very much once again to both of our speakers. I understand that in this very sensitive time, your time was very precious, and how courageous you have been speaking about this issue as well. So, um, of course, the conversation can be very wide, and we don't want to end it up. But of course, there are some limitations of time as well, and we cannot cover everything in one frame. Though we have tried as well. So, my last question to both of you, that if you could send one message to international youth, global leaders, or even the UN, for example, what would be that? We will start from Guguni and then, of course, Edward, to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nabila, for that question. And I just want to echo and emphasize this very important statement that young people want to be seen, young people want to be heard, young people want to be listened to. Young people have ideas that they want to be taken seriously. That is my parting shot to all the world leaders, especially leaders in developing countries. And young people is not just a few individuals, it is all the young people. Reach down to all the young people in marginalized communities, deep in the villages. Get those voices out. Listen to these ideas. Listen to what they're saying and do it. We've seen situations where reports are being written, memorandas are being crafted, declarations are being made, but then there isn't a follow up. We need those follow ups to be done because we've seen this is a problem even in Kenya. We have reports on task force, like I mentioned, the police reform task force. We have the Kriegler Commission report, the Waki report on election reforms. All these are reports, the NADCO, that were giving recommendation on how to deal with the cost of living by cutting down government expenses. And all these are good ideas that have been documented. But what is the follow-up? Where is the implementation? Where is the political goodwill? So my message to the leaders who are in positions of power and influence out here is that we want to see action. We want to see implementation. We want to see movement from speech to action. So give young people a platform to speak, listen to their ideas and take them seriously, and then move into action. Use your power to move things and help protect institutions that matter, especially institutions that relate to upholding the rule of law. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gugni, for your final message. And it was really powerful when you said that we want to see action. Of course, that is a powerful message. So over to you, Edward, the final message.
Thank you very much, Nabila. My message to the international youth who are different from Kenya, I want to tell them that we are fighting the same fight, just on different fronts. And your solidarity is our self-defense. We are looking forward to getting your support because we cannot win this war alone without your help. To the global leaders and institutions, especially institutions funding our countries, you cannot loan money to governments that shoot their own children. While expressing concerns, and challenges that they go through each and every day. Um, your spreadsheets can show the physical compliance, but to what end of losing citizens will you continue to support this government? And to United Nations, your beautiful declarations are worthless if they cannot protect a 29-year-old teacher from being shot for carrying a Kenyan flag. Rex Masai, for example, believed in the very principles your charter promised to defend. And so if you cannot investigate and even push for prosecution of such leaders, then you're not a guardian of human rights. You are a museum of good intentions. And finally, to everyone who is listening, and if they are leaders and who are in charge in different governments, I just want to amplify that we are not asking for your permission to change our countries as young people. We are informing you that we are the change that we seek, and we are coming to change our countries one step at a time. So choose wisely, choose quickly, because this is a generation of young Africans who will not be stopped, silenced, or solved. We are the disruptions you've been waiting for. Thank you very much, Nabila, for hosting.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edward. And yeah, very powerful statement from you as well when you said that the UN's beautiful declaration are worthless unless there is a real implementation. Of course, and it does matter as well. Uh, wow, thank you very much to both of our marvelous speakers, young activists from Kenya, whom have been worked so hard, so tirelessly, and so courageously towards the dignity of their country and raising voice of work. And this podcast as well is a power, pack for the youth across the board. Um, Thank you, Cody and Edward, for your brave voice and unwavering clarity. Kenya's youth are not just resisting, they are rebuilding. From hashtags to healing, from grief to growth, their story is part of a global youth evolution, of course. On our listeners, protest is just one step. Policy, partnerships, people power must follow. Continue to listen, learn, and act. Until next time, stay informed, stay bold. This is your host, Nabila Abbas, signing off for today. Thank you very much.